Hey friends, Jordan Peterson has come out with a new short video under the auspices of PragerU. You know, the conservative YouTube channel that pretends it's a university, which I was informed of by the usual swarm of gloating right-wingers who email me to let me know when I've been totally pwned by one of their heroes. I was informed that it will give people of my persuasion much to feel good about, which was a peculiar way to say it, but after a moment I realized that I am precisely the target of this video. Not by name, but I'm the kind of person Peterson despises. So a bit about me. I am a college professor at the University of Minnesota-Morris, a small liberal arts college in the upper Midwest. I teach biology, so maybe I'm not quite anathema. If I were a humanities professor, he'd be trying to get me fired and close down my discipline. But at least I am not shy about pointing out where Peterson is babbling bullshit about science. Also, I do love my humanities and social sciences and arts colleagues and consider their work to be an essential contribution to the legendary well-rounded education. I'm also currently a member of my university's Multi-Ethnic Experience Committee, which may be renamed the Diversity and Equity Community in the near future, and I fully endorse that group's work and think making the campus safe and supportive for all students is an important part of my job. And of course, in my personal life, I actively support progressive causes and have a reputation as an SJW, which means Peterson fans, if they watch this at all, are only hate watching it. Anyway, Jordan Peterson has come out with this video titled, "Dangerous People Are Teaching Your Kids." Dangerous people, yeah, that's me. Of course, what he's actually doing in the video is reciting dangerous lies about universities and educators, and the title more accurately applies to him. It's a kinda slick video, gussied up with cartoonish art, and the weakest parts of the video are the ones where it switches to focus on Peterson himself, where he just sits there, expressionless, staring at the camera. He reminds me of that angry uncle, staring at you all tight-lipped and pissed off that you dared to question him, thinking that he'd slap you good if you were his kid. Or alternatively, it reminds me of Quint's speech from Jaws. Ew. Grim and dead-eyed. Switch to the cartoons, quick! Okay, there are a lot of self-owns in Peterson's video. When I see resentment written on the screen, the most resentful people I know are the alt-right. He should talk to some of his campus colleagues. Resentment is the last thing on most of our minds when we're teaching. I see a lot of people who are so enthused about their field of study that they've committed their lives to it and want to share it with the next generation. When we get together at educational meetings to talk about our work, we talk about inspiring students to engage and enabling basic skills for progress. It's not a resentment-ridden ideology. Oh, but here's another one, and it's revealing. He claims that his critics want to destroy the civilization that he and they are part of. And why? Because they've made it their life's mission to undermine Western civilization itself, which they regard as corrupt, oppressive, and patriarchal. He doesn't consider the alternative. Perhaps we've made it our life's mission to undermine corruption, oppression, and the patriarchy. We would like to remove those three things from Western civilization and make it better. Peterson probably agrees that the first two, at least, are bad. He does seem to like the patriarchy, and would probably think educating against them would be a good thing. Does he think there is no corruption, oppression, or patriarchal thinking in Western civilization? Or is he saying that working against corruption, oppression, and the patriarchy is synonymous with opposing Western civilization? I would think not, I hope. This is simply a poorly worded piece of nonsense in his talk. So why does he assume liberals believe that there is no good in Western civilization? It's dishonest, to say the least. But no, he thinks we're out to annihilate the West, because we're nihilists. Look at that cartoon. These are the most cheerful nihilists I've ever seen. And look, they're standing on a pile of money. If I had to capture just one big line in this video, this would be it. College professors tend not to be nihilists. You don't go into this business out of despair, but only with hope for the future. College educations are all about the future. Furthermore, we tend not to be rich. Middle class at best, and not even that if you go by rich politicians' definition of middle class. The educational system's share of taxes has been going down, down, down for decades, and tuition has been going up, up, up. But not because we're pocketing that money. If anyone is profiting, it's lending institutions and Republicans who can gouge money out of the school budget because of attitudes like the ones Peterson is promoting. So now we switch to dead-eyed Peterson, and he makes an interesting mix of truth and lies. Yes, truth is subjective. We do agree with that. It takes hard work to extract a coherent, consistent truth out of a body of observation and experiment, and it is all held to be provisional, subject to change with new data. That's the way science works. That's the way every discipline works. This shouldn't be a point of contention unless you're claiming absolute knowledge and perfect truth, which isn't something that can legitimately come from the mouth of a human being. No one claims that all sex differences are social constructs. There are genuine biological differences, but they are more malleable and complicated than Peterson knows, and we social animals do build up elaborate social constructs of gender around them. Imperialism and colonialism are one source of the world's problems. No one claims that it's a source of all of the problems. And no one seriously believes that cultures untouched by empire are flawless paradises. Is Peterson endorsing imperialism? That would be interesting. We oppose it. He opposes us. So, do the First Nations people he claims to study find that a curious thing to say about their history? And you can be a modernist, not even a postmodernist, and agree with those so-called idealogues. Francis Bacon would have told you that while God might hold the truth, men do love their lies, and that we struggle to work through the shadows. So this is not a postmodernist idea. And yes, it is true. Colleges do try to educate students to be activists for their causes. You have a poor understanding of education if you think the opposite, that they're supposed to be passive receptors of received wisdoms. Yeah, okay. So he thinks that having people respond actively to problems and dishonesty and dissent means that they are a mob, a violent mob. But a good education leads people to question and dissent. They should openly and loudly argue against foolishness. The violent mobs are generally on the other side. When student activists protested Milo Yiannopoulos' speech at my alma mater, University of Washington, it was a right-winger who brought a gun to a demonstration and shot a protester. When Heather Heyer protested the neo-Nazis in the Charlottesville demonstration, it was an alt-right sympathizer who murdered her. It's part of that principle of free speech that Peterson venerates that allows for protest. The violence is coming from his friends. Not to claim that being on the left makes you perfect, but if we had to pin the violence on anyone, it's the Nazis. And this is just the purest nonsense. The language police, oh yeah, who enshrine into law the use of fabricated gender pronouns. I got news for you. All pronouns are fabricated. All of language is an evolving social construct. There is no language police. There are social mores that suggest that you ought to engage all members of your community with respect for their rights. Only assholes are resentful when they are informed that they are being disrespectful. And if you use your language to incite hatred and violence, then the real police have an obligation to stop you. Oh yeah, let's slander campus deans. No, I've known some of those deans. Finding no discrimination would make them so happy and relieved, and it would be so wonderful for all members of the campus community. It's the discrimination that is the problem, not the finding of it. They don't get paid per lawsuit against the university, I guarantee you. Their livelihood comes from helping to make a comfortable and productive environment for all students, faculty, and staff, and contributing towards making the campus an attractive site for prospective students. So, where do these horrible people come from? It's the damn hippies again. It's all their fault. I attended the university in the 70s, and that could be my picture, except that I didn't let my hair grow quite that long. I do remember how the establishment despised all things counterculture, however, and it seems that a lot of them haven't changed a bit since. They're still blaming the hippies. We just transformed into the new faculty. Well, I'm a little grayer than that picture, but okay, except, this is always true, that one generation follows another. And it's always the older generation that is resentful of that simple biological truth. Yeah, some people educated in the 70s became the professors of the 90s. Thanks for explaining time to us. I should mention, though, that there was a wide range of beliefs even then, and some conservatives also became professors, like a certain Jordan Peterson. Stop hitting yourself like that, man. So now he mischaracterizes education. First of all, why do our students rack up debt? Because conservative politicians hate supporting education. Don't blame the educators for student debt. What about this agenda here? Speak for yourself, Mr. Peterson. Postmodernist analysis techniques are all about questioning the meaning, examining text skeptically, and thinking more deeply rather than accepting superficial interpretations. It is about thinking critically. I've seen some of Peterson's lectures online, and if we're going to complain about babbling gobbledygook and demanding literal acceptance of nonsense, he wins. As for writing and speaking clearly, my discipline has a 2-year-long communications curriculum. I've read parts of Maps of Meaning. Jordan Peterson would not pass. So we have an agenda of rigor and practice and appreciation of the breadth of knowledge. We're not the ones advocating destroying and closing down entire branches of the humanities and social sciences, Mr. Peterson. That's your story. And now we're going to get into some more ridiculous mischaracterizations. Oh, come on, please. This is ridiculous. Shakespeare is not the be-all and end-all of English literature. You don't have to like him to be an English major. You can like him and be a biologist, for instance. He was a wonderful writer, and we encourage reading him. But there are thousands of wonderful writers whose work has also stood the test of time. The English curriculum does not have to stand frozen forever. And 4 years of undergraduate education is not the sole source of all knowledge for our students. We have to sample a subset of literature, and if an instructor chooses an alternative set of great writers, it does no harm to the standing of one left out that year. We should not be about dogma, even if Peterson would prefer it that way. Oh boy, here come the bad definitions. Right away, we're going to get into trouble because he's going to define postmodernism by his unholy trinity. And unfortunately, his unholy trinity has nothing to do with postmodernism. Here's a basic dictionary definition of postmodernism. It's a late 20th century style and concept in the arts, architecture, and criticism that represents a departure from modernism and has at its heart a general distrust of grand theories and ideologies, as well as a problematic relationship with any notion of art. It's really weird to see some group being tarred as ideologues when a fundamental concept in their whole idea is that they have a distrust of ideologies. Now, also in that definition, there's nothing about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Those are leftist progressive values, I would agree, but they aren't tied to his boogeyman version of postmodernism. Postmodernism in this usage is simply an empty word for a concept that he doesn't understand, that he uses as an insult, because his similarly ignorant fans will sympathize with it. He's just plain wrong. Okay, now look at his definition of this triad of unholy concepts. And once again, we're going to see an argument that requires redefining terms to a way not used by these so-called postmodernists. This is the very definition of a straw man argument. So first, diversity. What doesn't he like about diversity? I love being in a place where people have different histories and experiences, where different languages are spoken, where we discuss the art and literature and politics and science of the whole wide world. This is a good thing. And I don't see why Peterson is calling this part of an unholy trinity, except that it's a dog whistle to his racist followers who want uniformity. This whole nonsense about not allowing a diversity of opinion is baloney, okay? The fact that we have diversity means that we have a vast diversity of opinion already. Equity still has the goal of equality of opportunity. We work to give everyone an equal chance. There is, for instance, no dictum that we have to pass a certain number of brown-skinned students in our classes, or that they have different standards for passing our classes. All are on equal footing. All have to do equal work in order to succeed at the university. And inclusion, it just means that all students have the same status here. There aren't any quotas. If there are barriers to inclusion, we want to knock them down. You know you're making a bad argument when you rely on lying about what the people you criticize do and think, and that's exactly what Peterson is doing here. I would just ask Peterson a simple question, whether he really thinks his unholy trinity is bad for the university and what he'd replace it with. If it's just uniformly bad, then of course what he'd expect is it would be a virtue to have a white ethno-university where we don't consider a student's circumstances to give them an equal start, and where we exclude and ostracize people who don't look like us. I presume that that's not what he's supporting. He's just sort of vaguely waffling about it and allowing others to conclude that. That we value fairness does not mean that we've abandoned all other rights. There are more rights than simply, for instance, freedom of speech. And that's what he jumps into next, more misrepresentation. No, we like the exchange of ideas. We like free speech. The question here is, what about people who are not of goodwill? Does Peterson think they don't exist? What about neo-Nazis? Are we supposed to believe that they are people of goodwill? Or should we recognize that they're not interested in the free exchange of ideas or reaching consensus? They just want to impose destructive ideas on society. You have to recognize that that's a possibility. So yes, we like the free exchange of ideas. Peterson mischaracterizes this as favoring an ideal world in which is a Hobbesian nightmare of identity groups warring for power. No, I can say safely that my ideal world would be one of cooperation and diverse groups interacting amicably. We're about social justice, remember? That portrait that they put up is closer to the far right, conservative perspective, where you have to march around chanting, "You will not replace us," and screeching about white genocide because brown people exist. All right, this is ridiculous. Am I the only one getting exasperated by a tenured college professor whining about being silenced when his job is secure, he's raking in tens of thousands of dollars per month, and his words get reported in all the major magazines and newspapers? The victim complex is tiresome. Okay, now he's going to complain that we don't like capitalism. And gosh, I learned something new. Before capitalism, no one in history had food, shelter, or clothing. How did they survive? Now, let's be realistic. Capitalism has benefits, definitely. It also has weaknesses that can be exploited by the unscrupulous, as we are witnessing now. And it can be so burdened with parasites, the obscenely rich, that it is in danger of collapse. Maybe Peterson's real problem with us is that we lack the hyperbolic investment in the perfection of the economic system that he has. We lack his dogmatic religion. So he turns to a counterexample, Venezuela. I keep hearing this from the right. When were they a poster child for radicals? Was it during the juntas of the 40s? Was it during the guerrilla insurrections of the 60s? The economic crises of the 80s? The troubled mess of Hugo Chavez's presidency? It's a country that has long been plagued with political and economic corruption, foreign meddling, and the blessings and curses of an oil economy. Why is Peterson thinking this relevant? Is Venezuela post-modernist? Besides, if you ask most of us radicals what our ideal state was, most of us would answer Sweden or Norway. Then his third prong of opposition is identity politics. I wish somebody would define this for me. This is nonsensical. Individuals are people with diverse patterns of ethnicity, race, sexual preference, gender, and more. The point is to recognize the complexity of their makeup, not pretend it's non-existence. The idea that one is all one thing, one is all good, or all another thing, all bad, is counter to the whole idea of intersectionality. People are a mosaic of complex opinions and complex characters. We don't deny that. What's the alternative that Peterson proposes? Erasure? Oh, wait. All of these concepts originate with Karl Marx. All of them? Peterson has such a muddled and vague notion of what the things are that he hates that now I'm confused. So Marx invented postmodernism? He's responsible for the collapse of the Venezuelan economy? He told universities to enroll diverse student bodies? He hated Shakespeare? This just doesn't make sense. Peterson is incoherent, but he knows what magic buzzwords to say to appeal to the dogmatic right. Okay, so now we're going to get a simplistic version of Marxism. That it's all about class struggle and all this sorts of things. And yeah, that's a good part of it. But first of all, step onto any college campus in North America. You won't find many people who want to implement the full Marxist model. We're embedded in our current culture, and we might want improvements, but revolution is terrifying. I am considered fairly liberal, but I consider myself fairly conservative because I do not want a Marxist state. As he says, it's been a failure so many times. Let's learn from past errors and improve on it. And I also agree that authoritarian governments are deplorable and produce excesses unchecked by the will of the people. But sometimes so do democratic governments, as we are seeing firsthand. Soviet purges and the Great Leap Forward, the killing fields, are what happens with despotic governments. But he's glossing over something with his examples. He wants to claim that one moment communism kills all these people, and next he talks about a decades-long Cold War. Millions dead. Blame communism exclusively. But it seems to me that our war to stop those murderous notions was fought rather murderously. We were bombing the heck out of Southeast Asia for an awful long time. Those casualties count against us, as do the more recent casualties in Iraq and Afghanistan. And hey, wait a minute. When did we fight those wars to stop the spread of fabricated gender pronouns, campus diversity policies, and what the f, identity politics? This is absurd. Peterson is building a case for his ideology on the back of the Chewbacca defense. Worse, it's a Chewbacca offense. If Chewbacca lives on Endor, you must crush the political left. He's equating campus liberalism with Cold War Soviet Union, as if we're armed with nuclear missiles. We aren't, are we? I haven't checked the campus radical arsenal lately. And here we go. The grand finale of his video is an explosion of bullshit. Postmodern neo-Marxism is a contradiction in terms. I'm not even going to try and explain that. I'll just tell you to go watch ContraPoints, who deconstructs this whole pungent explosion of bloated, rotting whale guts in detail, far more intelligently and entertainingly than I would. I'll include a link down below the video. I will mention, though, that his dead-eyed lack of effect suggests that maybe he's wondering how he ended up here, lying for PragerU. And I will point out that the man who is indicting North American universities as hotbeds of bad ideas is himself a product of those universities. A perfect example of bad educational practice, and he's now reduced to shilling for a fake online university. His video was a disgraceful mess, and it's no wonder he looks like a zombie here. It was incoherent, inconsistent, and contradictory, built around misrepresentations and his own flawed, horrible biases. His own misunderstandings of concepts like Marxism and postmodernism have been pointed out many times before, but he apparently doesn't care to read them or understand them, and his own scholarly failings just become more and more apparent. I am P.Z. Myers, a professor of biology at the University of Minnesota Morris, speaking for myself and only myself. I am proud of the great education I received at DePauw University, the University of Washington, and the University of Utah, and my work as an instructor at Temple University and the University of Minnesota. And most of all, I am proud of my tolerant, thoughtful, activist students.